please search for Robbie Walters wherever you get your podcasts, and that is ROBIWALTERS. Thanks for listening.
What you chat about? What you chat about? What you chat about?
I am Robert Rinder. Now, I used to do international legal cases, defending and prosecuting, and wear a wig for work. That was for the law, just to be clear. And then a strange series of unusual events after, in fact, I had the enormous game-changing privilege of meeting you in peculiar circumstances and coming across your work when I was doing international law. I ended up in television, and some people now know me as Judge Rinder, where I do a daytime program arbitrating over a range of disputes, from extremely serious to cases involving, I'm not sure what time of day your podcast is on, but shitting goats and people that end up in lime green mankinis, losing bets with their friends. All of which your listeners may or may not be aware of. All of the cases are totally authentic. And in addition to that, in broadcasting over the last over half a decade now, I've been able to do a number of other things. I make a chat show on Channel 4, and on BBC I make documentaries chiefly about history, the past, memory, and the Holocaust. So that's what I do. But most people know me as Judge Rinder. And when they stop me in the street and I have the gift and privilege of being asked for a selfie, and I emphasize that because anybody in the public eye that complains about it should get a real job. You get positively to change happily the chemistry of someone's day just by smiling for the camera.
Amazing.
When people do that, they're always polite because they think I can send them to prison.
Right.
I don't know why. I think it's the Judge Rinder thing, Robbie.
It's obviously working.
Yeah, I think it's working. There you are.
Yeah.
So that's what I do.
Wow.
I also write a couple of columns.
Okay.
One where I answer as many legal questions as I can for people that don't have access to legal aid. Which, just to be clear, is everybody. Which is both a tragic thing and a pretty frightening thing, and it's becoming more frightening. And in the Evening Standard, I write about culture and class and basically things I love, and generally about me. It's not just because of my narcissistic personality disorder, although that's getting far worse, especially as I spent all this time in COVID lockdown. But also because I'm sort of finding, myself increasingly fascinating as I get older. And
that's good.
Right. So last week I wrote about why I'm so useless at dating, for example. I write about culture.
Come on, that's got to be a good one. Come on, tell us, why are you not so good at dating?
Well, the difficulty is, Robbie,
and I don't believe that.
No,
you're always fun when we go out. So
we have fun, but the problem is, so you and I can engage because the thing is, first of all, you are like an exquisite, non-smelly cultural onion, layered and fascinating and with endless stripping away, and it never sort of ends. You get to, and if you put, you can either end up in tears or depending on the sugar that you add to the conversation, it becomes sweet as well.
That's very
quite
kind.
happy with that little metaphor there, but it's true with you. But my problem is, I've got no. Are we allowed to swear on this podcast?
Yeah, say what you want.
I've got no bloody small talk. Right.
Yeah.
So years ago, when I was allowed to go on the apps, obviously now I'm a judge, I don't do that anymore. On Grindr and things like that. Not that I was ever on it. But Trinder, right. There'd always be ostensibly what they were is, I think they call them now hooking up apps, really. And you're supposed to engage with somebody, not necessarily with their physical form. It's basically 4 exchanges. And then the next moment you're wearing the person as a hat.
I've never had the app kind of dating.
No, because you fell in love just in time for all of this.
Yes.
My problem is with that whole exchange is, love, I've got no freaking small talk. So yes, we can have a good time. That's because we get down to it.
Yeah.
So I've got no kind of, how are you? If anybody asks me what my star sign is, there's no... My shoulders don't shrug high enough and my eyes won't roll round enough
Yeah.
to sort of go, I don't care.
Yeah.
So the challenge is that in any sort of what you might call shallow interaction, within 4 exchanges, rather than asking, for a rude picture,
Yeah.
I'm at exchange number 3. I'm sorry you had a bad day. Tell me about your childhood pain.
Right. Yes.
And on
which
one
we've just been discussing at length, haven't we?
But on one occasion, this resulted. In fact, I've kept screenshots of them. Fascinated by this sort of stuff. On one occasion, I ended up filling in somebody's employment appeal tribunal on one of these exchanges. On another occasion, somebody came round to my house actually to, this was, I'd say, pre-television days. I ended up doing their tax return.
No.
Yeah.
Are you serious?
Yeah, because I don't have small. They were in crisis.
Right. So you wanted to
I've
get
got
straight to the point, get to help.
I can't have I'm not great at lasting shallow interactions.
Yeah.
I can pretend them.
Yeah.
But if they're going to result
going-
right,
You can't.
if they're going to
fill in the
manifest in a
blanks.
physical form,
Yeah.
I somehow feel like the experience is cheapened unless I understand who you are or what's going on. I
That
feel
makes sense.
maybe.
I think I probably have the privilege of meeting you before you did the television. So I don't have that preconceived idea of seeing
Sure.
you from the other side of the screen and making my opinion of you before meeting you, which I'm sure some people that meet you now,
Yeah,
they probably think they have an idea of who you are before they've met you,
that's true.
which I don't think those two things would always meet up. I think you're
Maybe.
constantly surprising me, and I think I do. Like even
so
your knowledge of art, for example, is like far superior to mine.
But it's not knowledge, it's not superior.
Yeah.
I feel really strongly about this. And you've sort of touched something which really is massively important to me. And it really matters. I grew up in Southgate and I've had I delight now in the word privilege. And I think about it every day and about what it means. It's a word that people want to sort of throw about or desecrate because it's being picked up by people I think that are insincere or haven't consciously thought about what it means. And for me, the most important privilege is growing up in a family of unconditional love.
Yes.
But at the same time, the privileges that were missing was kind of the cultural richness. And, my mum, who I adore, who you met,
I love your mum. Hello,
she
Mum.
adores you too. But the first, book I read, I realised was Jackie Collins's American Star. Well, all I can tell you is the first paragraph of it definitely was very shocking. I'm not suggesting I am how I am, but I feel sure if I could unread what happened to that poor woman in the first scene, things may have been different.
Wow.
But the point was, art galleries and things that were that society foisted a cultural value on weren't within kind of meaningful reach of me. I don't people where I'm from don't sound like me. I've cultivated this because I don't know why, but I guess some people say I sound like I've mugged a Mitford. But part of that was because I was a gay person growing up and this was a persona that I created around internally what was happening. But for me, art mattered.
Right.
And it still does. And the reason I take you up, sorry,
No,
say
please.
about knowledge,
Yeah.
so I hate that word when it comes to art, knowledge.
Right.
I've got...
It's a feeling. Is it an experience? Is it the...
because it presupposes that you need it.
Right.
To love, to experience, to delight in art, to have a reaction that's more valid than anybody else. I feel really passionate about this.
Yeah.
I come into my house and I've got a piece of yours, the house was which hopefully we'll talk about, which is a centerpiece to my home. And it's, in many respects, the kind of emotional heart of my home. And, sometimes I really have people around, mainly because you have to cook and I've got no transferable skills. I've realised in lockdown...
You can't cook?
I can't do anything, love. We've talked about this. Whereas in the event of war, it's not my... people say, what would you do? I can't bang in I'd have to be a hostage. I've got nothing. But people come to the house and I've got pieces over the years I've collected because I love them. A Picasso drawing, I know, I'm feeling proud of myself. All because I love them. I've got some other, inverted commas, pieces by, especially art in the 1920s, which hopefully we'll come on to and talk about why I'm passionate about that, especially art in Russia in the 1920s and 30s. But at the centre of it is your piece. And
Right.
people come around to the house and I'll say, because I don't have a car, I never have a car, but you get no joy out of it. I never have a good watch or whatever, but the delight in art, the way that it somehow permeates into your space and can happily change the conversation of a day just by being near it. It's joyous. But you say to someone that comes in, do you like art? And what happens? So they'll go, yes, but I don't know much about it.
Right. So,
as if they're about to sit
see.
an exam.
All right.
As if there's a barrier to entry, which is the word knowledge.
Yeah, I understand.
So when you say knowledge, the reason I bristle
understand.
is you don't need knowledge. If you go into an art gallery, all I ask you to do is look at it and be honest.
Yes.
That's all. Be authentic.
Yeah.
Don't say anything that anybody's conscripted you to think about it because there's some person that looks like they've escaped from Harrods food hall and they look like they're posh, they sound posh, that they know, inverted commas, what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Don't validate your opinion about based on the echo of what they're saying.
Right.
If you have an opinion and you feel nothing, or you feel a visceral, angry reaction, or you think it's crap, that's valid. And it's not your fault, it's the artist's.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't know, I just feel so passionate about this because I feel like gallery spaces and art in general, just the word art, it feels like in order for you to delight in it, you have to have knowledge. And it's the one cultural form.
I started with the wrong word, but it's a good...
You don't need any knowledge.
Yeah.
You can, if it makes you joyous authentically.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, that matters.
It does. Today, so I have an annual trip out with my father-in-law every year, and we normally end up in Dover Street Market. It wasn't open this morning, so we went for a walk, and I said, the White Cube, we're in St. James's, and I said, the White Cube's just here. He hadn't seen it. We walked in. I don't know the artist's name. The art was magnificent.
Amazing.
The scale, the colour, all it was black, large, with a gold, what looked like a handprint, and taken off. Stunning.
Sounds like I'd hate it, but I need to go and see it.
It was stunning. It's like it's strange to think that something so simplistic. Like we were looking at all of the other smaller galleries as we were walking, but we never had that response. And both of us, we were just like, "It's magnificent," and it was so simple. And then downstairs there was these line drawings. And his name's Chris, my father-in-law, and Chris was saying, look at the shakiness of the line of the hand, how expressive that is. I can really feel the person. And the ink of one line, it's thick and then it goes thin and then it goes thick. And he was like, have you ever used like a pen with a quill or something where you can turn the nib to the side and you're turning it back again? And it was like, it was almost sensual the way he was talking about it. And it was like, and again, it was stepping away. We had no knowledge of the artist. We knew nothing about the artist, but just that fit, like, and I haven't been to a gallery since the beginning of the year. So I'm talking a good, we're in almost October. I haven't been in a gallery since at least February. And it was amazing. I felt.
So what I love about that
beautiful.
story is that your father-in-law, looking at that line, it's not what you thought.
Yeah.
And of course, the gift of being with him, because he could translate that enthusiasm to you.
So beautiful.
And it's like somebody, it's very Dead Poet Society. That moment when the late Robin Williams, what was he called? Oh, Captain, My Captain. It's from the Walt Whitman poem, but I can't remember the name in the actual film. He gets all the kids to stand on the chair and look at the world differently from that. And that's what
that's what happens.
Don't embarrass you. No, it's what you do and what artists help us to do. But to be with somebody that has that experience of going, hey, look at that man or woman, that human being's hand. And just that relationship with a moment in time of how they've made that mark onto a canvas or onto the world. And it's a mark that lasts forever. And it's technical and it has muscle memory. And it's a moment in time.
Yes.
It's amazing.
We were speaking earlier about the presence of a moment being captured in something. So you was describing it in the brick, in the tower. And it's almost like in everything that we all do, like often I've walked along a street and I'll gaze at a tree and I try to go out of the moment and time that I'm in and think, what else has passed here and what memory is still in this moment, but past moments of this moment. And it's like, and I think art, photography, there's certain things that it freezes something, but it does capture all the moments thereafter. So when you said about the 1920s Russian, did you say?
Yeah, especially Russian art, especially now. But
I'm sure it captures moments after the moment of the creation.
It
Is that
does.
still...
that for me is more. I want to come back to what you just said because
Yeah.
it's important. We did have a conversation, before we
Yes.
went on stage.
Yeah.
So I think you've articulated something that is really important. I don't think I thought of or can kind of articulate or really express in a way which people understand until they see it. What we're talking about is, when you go to the Tower of London, I say if you crowd out the flight path and you can stand there and look at a brick that's been there for 400, 500, 600 years perhaps. And what happens is there's a moment of shared consciousness between you and another human being that would have stood there and seen that. And then the object becomes like a time machine. It's got the imprint, the energy, as you might say, of human memory. And we share that, holding hands through the tapestry of time with one another. And that's a certain brand of magic. And then the object is transformed. And so recently, I've been making programs and about the Holocaust, and I made one about my family, and I've got a documentary due to come out soon. And just a quick story, if I can, about the...
Please.
I went to a woman's house, and she was the last eyewitness to a massacre that took place in her village in Belarus. And the shortened story is our interpreter. Interpreters who do simultaneous interpretation tend to stop after 40 minutes or so because your brain switches off and it goes into a new place. You're numbly translating words, but you're often disconnected as a translator from the actual words because to do your job adequately. If you emotionally
get a certain amount of concentration,
well, sure, but you might have
muscle that's
to be sure, but you might have a political opinion about what's happening, for example. So you tend just numbly to translate the words. This woman was describing this unspeakable human horror. And the translator almost came back into the room and I could see what was happening. And my Russian's okay, enough to take over. And I started asking questions because he sort of stopped. Anyway, what she said after the description of this event was that the mound, she said, the mound after these people had been killed and buried, the mound was moving, she said in Russian, for 2 days. And I thought of those words and they were words to me. And the director of the film, he just made me think of this, director of the program, inspired man, an artist, proper artist. He said, we're going to go to a Soviet memorial of where this event took place. And I assumed, like lots of Soviet memorials, it would be a stone monolith. And in Russian, it would say, this is the death of Soviet citizens. And there'd be no other mention specifically of, in this case, the Jews who were murdered in this place. And I got there, and instead what it was, and I hadn't anticipated this, was on the side of an insignificant road in an insignificant town with an insignificant set of insignificant trees was a ring fence about 100 meters in front of me and maybe about 3 meters wide. And in the center of this little ring fence was topographically the mound. And it had been there for 75 years. Nothing apart from a tiny bit of moss had grown on it. And it's the mound, it's the object. Precisely as this woman had described. The mound was moving 2 days later, she said. And I was standing at it. And I hadn't anticipated my reaction. And it's fascinating because I have a reaction that's on camera and it was visceral
Right.
And I've watched it back now 3 times, and I have no memory of being there, of saying the things that I say, looking at that mound, the dirt, the mound.
Wow.
I have no memory of it at all.
Wow.
And it's interesting. I mean, from that point of view, you know, like you say, like so I don't want to get sort of into the difference between art I love and don't, or art that makes me feel nothing. But so when you talk about having the privilege of being with your father-in-law,
Yes,
because look at that brushstroke. This is what it does. You go, oh yeah. That's such a. So for me, there's this sort of there's a human memory in objects, in trees, in things. That have and contain living memories that have the power and capacity to affect us in ways that when they're real and authentic and have value, by value I mean history and intention, that can change everything, I think.
You've just brought, like, this literally just came up. Never thought this ever before. Do you think a writer that writes books, do you think the reader would read it different if they read their writing versus the typed version of the book?
You mean if they read their handwriting?
Yeah.
That's an interesting question.
Does that make sense?
No, I do.
Does it change the story? Because they might have a gap in between a word. It might be bigger. It might be. I never thought of that until you just.
I'm always the way you're talking. I always want to put distance between a question like that and ever giving a reactionary answer. It's the type of thing I want to sleep on and then think about for 3 weeks.
But it just came up from the way that you're talking. It's just like...
I don't know if it would. I mean, for example, Toni Morrison wrote all of her books in longhand. Okay. And she would get up at like, I've been rereading Beloved recently. I mean, I don't know if I could say fucking hell, but fucking hell. Could she write? Yeah. And any of your listeners, watch her interview with Charlie Rose. Okay. It's unbelievably powerful. But she got 5 o'clock in the morning. She'd be finished by lunchtime. She wrote every single one of her books in longhand, in pads, every single one. So you can see them. And I wonder that, because it's my most recent serious novel I've read, it's fascinating. I thought that I'd love to see the pads. Yeah. Again, a slightly different person, totally different on the spectrum. Nancy Mitford, whose books Love in a Cold Climate and Pursuit of Love are endlessly funny. She wrote all of her books in longhand. Dickens did, of course, too. Right. So you can see. So I don't know if that's the case. What your question led me to think of is there is a museum in Prague called the Lefkowitz Museum, and the Lobkowitz, and the Lobkowitz family would basically had all of their property disappropriated, nicked by the Soviet authorities, and what happened was that they decided, this incredibly passionate guy, they moved to Canada, they moved back to Prague once the Iron Curtain fell, and they rebuilt the entire museum and all the property that was there. And it's one of the most popular visited attractions. In fact, it's like TripAdvisor #1 in the whole of Prague. And amongst the things that they've got, I'm pretty sure it's this. They've got a Beethoven score with Beethoven's handwriting. And there's something about that. That's what it made me think of.
This is what I'm thinking of,
When you look at that, you think...
Even something that's been corrected, because that's changed the course of that
history.
moment forever. It could have been a different note, but you can't see that when you see the printed version.
Right. Well, you can see, I mean, musicians, especially when they look at the handwritten notation, I mean, there's an absolute sort of magic of that. People think of major documents.
Yeah. Well, you're even in your profession, like the legal profession, there is the spoken word, but you know, the signing of a name or the printing of a like a declaration or a like words and so
Really
important.
interesting question, you know, because
There is a difference between someone writing
And
their
typing.
signature and versus a stamp of their signature. There must be a difference between those.
well, there's a
two
disconnect.
things.
I mean, there's a disconnect between physically typing and pressing a button and the printing. It's a psychological disconnect. I'm going to put it in a really crass and perhaps challenging way between making the plans to murder somebody and then building a factory of death.
Right.
You know, when you shoot somebody in the head,
Yeah.
vis-a-vis being the civil servant, that makes the designs for Auschwitz.
Right.
You're not physically connected to the word in the same way.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting thing in this regard. You know, it's a really interesting thing. When I first started, all of the silks I knew, the senior lawyers, I mean, they would write all of their submissions out and I'd have to type them out.
writing?
No. So I mean, you've got good at one, my mentor in particular, it's like this sort of spider diagram. Eventually you get used to it. But, you know, you think about it, and obviously I immediately go to the most extreme case. But just think about not actually doing a stamp. You think about the judges of the 19th century and before, and leading, in fact, up to the mid-20th century. You physically, your hand, physically have to do the work of signing somebody else's death warrant.
Wow.
And it made me think,
That's powerful.
what's your...
But are they removed from that? Are they... Oh my God, now you're over.
Well, I mean, you think about it. So, I mean, it's a really interesting story. You know, when Charles I was executed, I think the second signatory was Oliver Cromwell. You know, just for your views, it's worth. I'm doing in lockdown to save my friends all day e-schooling. I've been doing 2 hours a day of history from Tudors. Don't go mad.
What are you? Is this online? Can we?
It's one-to-one lessons. I tried to do it in a group thing.
It and...
No, do me a favour.
Come on.
No, but I like the one-to-one thing. It's delightful. But I go from the Bosworth, so basically Henry Tudor to 1688. Don't worry. I feel all of my friends, as I said, is going, don't ask me any questions. It's all right now. And I dress up as Anne Boleyn.
You dress up as well?
Well, let's not go. But I think I look like Anne Boleyn, but they say, my friends, I look like the ugly wife Anne of Cleves. But they are. But in this, of course, we do the Civil War before 1688. And of course, young people love details. They like, horrible histories.
Yeah.
They want to know this stuff and who wrote what. And if you show them things, especially people things
They'll
are
learn
written.
so much more.
They just delight in objects, especially things where you can connect the hand, the object to the person.
Yes.
And so the death warrant, which is really interesting, of Charles I, you have to, Cromwell and the other kind of diehards had to really persuade other people to sign. In some instances, they physically got their hand.
Right.
To sign
Because they would not.
They wouldn't.
Of their own free will.
Right. And so in the signature, right, you look at Guy Fawkes. I don't know why we've gone here. I was thinking about it. But a lot of viewers you can go online and see it. You can see his 2 signatures before and after torture.
Oh my goodness.
Right. And so you come back to that art gallery.
Yeah, that's
the shaky hand.
The shaky hand. And you know when you were saying about, is it the Good Poet Society or the seeing it from standing on the chair and seeing it from a different...
Yeah.
I will never look at ink, not like just like scroll, but ink on paper, a drawing, I will never look at the line the same again because of an 80-something-year-old man I look up to had an observation that he shared with me, and now it's changed the way I look at that thereafter.
Forever. Right.
Amazing.
Like Paul Nash.
So simple.
Right.
So
the moment
simple.
somebody goes, you have the gift. You talk about privilege. That's a privilege, you see. Yeah. You're with someone on that day. that had this genuinely authentic observation
Yeah.
that you authentically agreed with, that
Yeah.
you felt.
Yeah.
That man, because sometimes you also have to be
you
brave
could
enough to
reject
go,
it.
I don't,
Yeah.
but you have to be brave to
Yeah.
do that, to go,
Yeah.
I don't think
I
that.
really looked in and I was really
Right,
studying
but you
it
did that. But
afterwards.
also for some people, you have to look in.
Yeah.
But you also have to accept some people. You might have an conversation, be feeling that, go, I don't see that. And I think we need to be part of a conversation of making that more okay.
Yes.
For people to go, actually, that's not how I feel.
Yeah.
Fine.
We went into, that was the second gallery we went into. In the first one, he said, when we were in the gallery, he said, so what do you think about this art? And I went once and I said, can I tell you outside the gallery? And then I was like, you know, no one's going to know what the art was. But I was saying that there was a real play on the green and the reds, and that's a very obvious thing to do.
Yeah.
And I thought that that was distracting from what the subject was. And I didn't really connect with the subject. And I was giving a really honest opinion. I didn't connect with it. And I thought, you know, And then the next one, it blew both of us away.
Right. But you had, to some extent, you come, despite whatever background or personal history or baggage, you come with the privilege of being an artist.
Right.
And a respected one, and an artist, undoubtedly an artist who's holding on as an artist, which means you come with authority and expertise to that.
Really? Well, see, I probably would reject that from...
Right. No,
like
but that's true. I mean, and so... I don't know.
I know in art fairs, if I'm in an art fair and I see the gallerist or the dealer or the person representing the gallery and the artist, and I stand behind and I listen to them explaining the work and hanging out with other artists, and you go into their studios and they're like, you know, give us another drink or roll up another cigarette, and then they start painting. Whereas when they're describing it, they're like, oh, the artist felt this in that moment. And I'm like, how on earth do they know?
Thank you. Right. Don't get me... Okay.
No, but I'm an
I don't
artist.
want to get...
How do you know
I don't
that
want to get an e-warning on your podcast, right? But nothing, I'm sorry to use this language, you might have to cut it out. Nothing effing annoys me fucking effing more than reading into the pretentious abyss of someone's thought chat about what was happening. Give me the date.
In that moment.
Give me the name.
Yeah.
I don't want you to locate it in its wider history.
Yeah.
I want you to tell me the name of the artist.
Yeah.
The date, I think, can and very often does matter.
Yes.
Often in contemporary spaces, not so much.
Yeah.
But how
has an
dare
effect.
you interfere with my experience of what that work is? And often it's phrased in the most pretentious
I don't even understand
bullshit.
some of the words. So how...
You're not supposed to. But that's what makes it outrageous.
But doesn't that separate you as opposed to pulling you in?
Of course it does. And what it does is it makes it more elitist.
Yeah.
Because if I don't understand the words, how am I supposed to engage with the work? I don't come to it, first of all, through the experience of having an authentic moment with whatever the work is. I'm supposed to, first of all, weed whack my way through somebody else's bullshit. This represents the magical symbiosis between the painter's feelings of abandonment and the moment when he discovered the colour green. You're like, oh, do me a favour, love. Do you know what I mean? You might be
1,000%. I struggle with that. And there's another side. So that's the language side, but there's also the physicality of space. And if you when I was younger and I would go into a Mayfair gallery, which I assumed was a high watermark of this is the elite or the success. And you walked in and someone behind a desk would look up and kind of look back down. I felt like, wow, I felt like I've just been told off.
Right.
Not that I don't even feel like I should be in this room.
Yeah.
One, don't ask about anything. Certainly don't ask the price. And you can't afford it, so why are you looking at it? And I just felt awful.
No, I hear
and
that.
It's like,
I think that's a special sort of shaped Mayfair gallery issue, to be sure. I say to be sure, it probably is. I mean, I walk in. I mean, not so much now because they think, I'm going to, have no taste to buy Robi Jeff Koons. All of a sudden they're, kissing your ass. But I want to emphasise because it's really important. I hope that lots of people that, will come eventually, if they don't already, to really love and understand your work, is that there are spaces that aren't like that.
Yeah.
And it matters to me that, the National Gallery and the Tate Tate Britain, by the way. Don't forget Tate Britain. It's not just Tate Modern, Tate Britain as well.
Yeah.
That I think more and more, there are problems with them, to be sure, but they are still spaces which there isn't anybody who's standing there wondering what the hell you're doing there.
No, I don't feel that in those spaces.
And I really want that message to be.
It's important.
It's important. You're
very-
right about Maeve. People look up and go. Just one other thing I want to ask you, just really because you raise it. Why I get frustrated by the interlocutor, person writing that piece.
What does interlocutor
The person
mean?
involved in the discussion, the person who's speaking on behalf of that piece of art.
Yeah.
Is oftentimes, I know that an artist can articulate, insofar as they can, why they made a piece of work. And often they do it really well. But, sometimes it's where prose ends and poetry begins. And I think there's such a deep psychological complexion to a lot of artists' work that a great deal of the time they don't understand.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why they've made a piece of work, how it's emerged and manifested. And that's not a pretentious thing to say.
Yeah.
I've had experiences of artists' work which has moved me to tears. In a really non-pretentious way. I mean, as far as, when I felt depressed or low over lockdown, as soon as the National Gallery opened, I've gone and seen a couple of paintings. It's sort of a moment of not feeling alone so much, And there's my experience that I'll project onto the artist. I don't know. It might be because perhaps part of the composition is speaking to me. It might be a look that somebody's got. Now, I don't want somebody else to locate that for me.
Yeah.
And I know that there is that layer in there. People are, infinitely complicated. Artists, perhaps, are the most extreme end of that complication. So I don't want somebody's writing to limit what I can experience, or worse still, to project a limit on what the emotional range that the artist was trying to express in the first place. There's a universe of intellectual, emotional complexity happening.
Yeah. I think we was discussing it when we were upstairs, and I am the first to put my hand up and say, this is my interpretation of my own work. You may have a completely different version of this, and that's okay.
Yeah.
I don't have, this is the footprint, and therefore it needs to be cookie cut and imprinted on everyone else's minds. That's not what this is about. That's what I was saying about, if you paint a painting, you're taking the artist to that place. Whereas my work, I'm trying to do the opposite and take the viewer back to a place within themselves. It's not an external experience. If anything, the art isn't that important. It's your experience for me that's important.
Well, your listeners, sorry, we should take, because actually that's exactly how I came to your work, which people should know. So it's like a perfect segue, which is true. So I, for a variety of reasons, because I can't actually talk even today about the nature of the meeting I was in, but put it this way, it's a very serious meeting with very serious people about extremely serious international issues. And Robbie, you were displaying, as a lot of good artists do nowadays, in this particular law firm.
I knew a couple of the QCs in there, and very kindly they helped me. So it was...
I might have helped you, okay.
Well,
but it wasn't if it was good, but it just happened you were showing there. And I actually was quite importantly involved in this particular nuanced issue of the case that we were dealing with. And I was supposed to be plugged in and engaged, and there were 3 pieces on the wall. And it's so interesting. So I was like, first of all, exactly, I can't agree that it put me back in, because the first reaction was, I'm not in this room. And I don't mean that in British. I'm not in this conversation now, because
which is an important one by the sounds of it.
It was a very important conversation, but I mean, whatever. I mean, it was okay in the end. I want to be clear about that. I did read the papers eventually. Yeah. But I was immediately transported from the immediate conversation to what's that? It's just a simple, because
what is this?
This is extraordinary. Yeah. Then it's exactly so. Then it was like, somehow you'll be in a noise, a room. There's like sort of that white noise around, but you can somehow plug into somebody else's conversation. That's what the next thing happened. That was the next thing that happened. We've talked about this before, and then the next thing was, I was like, okay, Because at the end of it, I need to know who made this up. Now, I'm sure you had a range of intentions and there was a variety of energies and thoughts that went into making that work. But I don't know about that. Some of which I suspect you don't know.
Yes.
Subconscious, conscious. The conscious stuff you'll be aware of.
Yeah.
I can just tell you, I was sitting there, supposed to be giving advice on this international thing, going, "Yeah, all right, shut up. What's that? Like this is this is doing like what? Who made this?
Right.
Like, and how is it in what? Who? You know?
Yeah.
And you know, a lot of the law firms, they've got some of the so-called big artists and stuff. You know, they've got Degas and goodness knows what else. I'm sitting there going, what? Who? And then
That's incredible.
I mean, that's what happened. I mean, it's a true story. And then I was like, who is this?
I mean, I certainly wasn't trying to talk to you about like you talking about my art.
No, but that's what happened. It's important, you know.
But it's, you know, I think I spoke about this with someone else, and what I mean by that is being the personality types that we develop from young people as we grow up. I always found it very difficult to take a compliment. I thought I wasn't worthy, and I'm just going to keep it really sweet and short. Thank you.
Oh no, I hear you.
I mean it seriously.
Well, it's a big journey for you to go on to have actually accepted a compliment, and you know, one day. It's true. Well, it's easier for me because you know I've got no bullshit. You know, I've walked in.
Yeah, you're.
Well, the first thing we just said,
and like,
right? Yeah. I mean, I came and just said, you know, I'd been in the Tate Modern. I had to walk through the Rothkos, which were all shit. And you're going, no, and I'm going, yeah, they don't have, you know, they don't do it for me. Yeah. And
this is specific,
right, but I think you do the honour of somebody that's made work. I think that. So I would never write a piece going, they are shit.
Right. Yes.
That matters.
Yes.
If you make art and tell me it's not good for you, I'm never going to tell you that work is invalid. I'm going to tell you my reaction to it. And if it's derivative, I'm going to say that reminds me of so-and-so. And if it doesn't feel that it touches me, if you ask me, I will tell you that. But the reason for Rothko, I'll say, I don't say it is shit. I say for me, it does nothing.
Yes. I like the for me. There's a distinction there.
Right.
That's really important.
Sure.
There's something that's literally just come up.
Except Jeff Koons.
Go on, please. You was about to say something about Jeff Koons earlier.
You should have invited. You see, it's like a lecture. You wouldn't ask questions, and you invite me. I'm just shouting and going on and on.
No, please. You said that you come to discover a new way of viewing his work. Could you elaborate?
Exclusive
because I have you didn't tell me.
Okay,
and I'd
so
like
this
to
is
hear.
literally an exclusive for you, and I haven't discussed this anywhere apart from with a friend on the phone actually a couple of days ago. A couple of weekends. Do you know James Martin? He's a chef, TV chef.
Okay.
Anyway, I mean, it's no secret because I'm about to write about, and I told him I would never. I don't do ropey diary behind someone's back. He films his show in his house. Okay. And when I arrived at his house, all COVID-tastic, and he puts me in his like man cave. And I'm like, oh Lord, what am I going to talk to this man about? It's full of pinball machines and motorbikes and, movie posters. And I'm thinking, we're just not going to have a common kind of thing. So I'm like Googling the movie poster and it's some French film that nobody's ever seen. I'm like, I want to talk to this man about. And as it happens, actually, prima facie, we had little in common until he started showing me his car collection. Right. And again, I'll get there. Yeah. Right. And he started showing me his car collection. I can't stand cars.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. This is even more of a disconnect.
Loathe them. Yeah. Like, my day is ruined on Judge Rinder when I open the brief and it's so-and-so's car engine blew up. I'm like, oh, God. Because I don't know the difference between a Gucci belt and a fan belt. I'm not... I've got no interest. I don't get delight out of them. I don't understand it. I don't. I would never drive. I mean, out of respect for other road users, I don't drive. I mean, I can drive. I just there's no joy in them for me. But I understand people collect them. Yeah. Anyway, there he was, and he's got a collection of extremely valuable cars. I won't say which ones, but they are. Some of them are the most original. Well, I mean, it's no secret. He's very well known for being a lover of cars. Anyway, around this one car, which was handmade, all of a sudden this person came alive and he was speaking with this kind of authentic enthusiasm about it and about the shape of it. And to be sure, for me, it transformed into a piece of sculpture.
Oh, lovely.
And also the other thing which was weird, which I normally would hate. You know, you don't do that about, oh, this worth, you know, unless there's something wrong with you or you're in parts of America, you know, where, you know,
that's the
so-and-so will put an elbow through a Picasso and go, that's 30 million down the, you know, the check.
Yeah.
You buy art for value instead of delight. There are people like that.
Yes.
When somebody collects cars, the value is inherent to the delight in the car because the value somehow is connected to the story of the vehicle. Most vehicles you buy depreciate, but these collector's items go up in value. So, but the delight of the owner isn't just... the value is connected to the sculptor, to the work, to the hand of the person that made it.
Yes.
It did nothing for me, but I was delighted to be in the presence of someone's joy in a thing because it was real. And you can you can listen to someone speaking with authentic enthusiasm about broccoli. If they're,
I love
it's
that.
heaven, isn't it? Right.
I love it.
Anyway, so he was into this stuff. And then the only art, I mean, he had some art, he had a really interesting Lowry painting, actually, which was interesting. I was sort of interested. And then also I saw a couple of Jeff Koons, which normally have the effect of making me angry.
Right. Yeah.
It makes it, because manufacturers.
Yeah.
Because there's a disconnect
totally manufactured
between the hand of the, but I had this moment of understanding where here's a man, James Martin, who loved his cars. And for him, even though some of them were made in factories, he got a delight in the value, in the form, in the sculptor, in the same way like Ferrari or Porsche, whoever made that thing, that for him, the Koonses had that sort of value. You know, it wasn't just about display.
Yes.
It was somebody that liked cars in a way. Now, it just made me less angry about Jeff Koons somehow.
Right.
But if you're watching Jeff, whatever. Sorry. Sorry, I'm just...
Well,
anyway,
keeping it real. It's like,
I just, you know, I mean, it's just not...
He's a master at... I guess the marketing and the raising of value of the, like, I don't, he came from finance, didn't he? I think he was
think so. That's right. There was a documentary I watched. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like I say, the reason I felt more okay about it in a nutshell was because this
that
chef...
love was transferable into something.
Right.
Yeah.
Enthusiasm.
Enthusiasm.
He'd bought them because he loved the shapes.
Absolutely.
Because for him, manufacture of you know.
Yeah.
Whereas a bit like, all right. I just don't get how you can... You don't need to have emotion, right? Anger can be a reaction.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and you can see through the life of an artist's work sometimes. Like, I love Tracy Emin's tent. I mean, genuinely, there's something radical. And again, when I hear myself say radical, I feel people like rolling their eyes and stroking their shoulder, go, do me a favour, radical. But we forget when it was made. You sit in a tent and like all of the names sewn of people being inside her.
Yeah, that's right.
And that whole, you know, in a really unwanky, pretentious way about the idea of being inside a person. And that, you know, I was like, I was moved by that. Whereas, yeah, some of the drawings, especially her drawings for me, don't do anything. Don't do anything for me. Anyway.
It's good that you can separate, like some people... With today's society, especially within tribalism, so say, for example, if, like, I would probably get in trouble even saying this, but I grew up in a Spurs family, and if I go to Arsenal and I ring my friend and I say, hey, I'm at Arsenal, and he's like, and it's a good friend, and like, what are you doing here? You can't be here, it's Arsenal. And that tribalism of, you know, you can like a Tracy Emin sculpture, but you might not like her drawings. Like, why do you have to like everything? And why do you have to like only one? Or like, why can't I be at another football? Like, there's such a divide. Like, you can't like that and enjoy this. You can't do that. That's against the rules.
Sure. You call it tribalism, and obviously coming from a Tottenham Hotspur family, I hear you. Yeah. That was my family's religion. Right. The way that the men, that's why, you know, struggle relationship with my dad, but my entire universes of history and emotional experience were communicated with my brother and my dad through Tottenham Hotspur. Right. Even now.
I didn't know. Seriously.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know.
And my dad now, who is sadly not well, but, you know, the opening salvo of a half brother as well. and they're all into football. And Tottenham Hotspur is their in.
Right.
It's
It's the centre of their...
It's the happiness, it's the sadness, it's the way that they can communicate about their
Right.
health, it's the...
Right. Wow.
It's the small talk, it's the deep talk, it's the... And sure, it's tribal.
Yeah.
But yeah, I there is a... It's more than a form of tribalism. I think it's much more insidious in everywhere, but certainly in our country, let's call it that, where so-called class is the barrier to entry. It's a posh way of saying, of going, that once somebody deems something, and that somebody is usually a person who looks a certain way and sounds a certain way, and it's in the right gallery and has been deemed, has been given the sanctity by that person as being great art. We are now conscripted into going, wow. And that's more than a form of tribalism.
Yeah.
It is a form of tribalism, I suppose,
Yeah.
but it's a kind of really crass class horror that our society is still kind of dealing with.
I find like there's even like, and I say football because it's an obvious one, but say for example, there'll be certain attributes within Conservative or Labour or other, and I agree with them. But if I was to say, if I'm with someone and they're totally Labour, and I'm like, but I actually I agree with this particular point within the other party, that's it. I'm cut off. It's like the conversation can't go any further. It's like I've crossed over to the...
That's certainly true of the current political landscape. You know, I was reading something the other day, and it was actually, funny enough, it's by a director who made this point. It was then subsequently, I think, quoted again, perhaps in a podcast I was listening to, but I remember the original quote, which was something: tyranny is the deliberate removal of nuance.
Right.
I think, that's about right. In other words, politics, life, human solutions to human problems are multifaceted.
Absolutely.
And you think about that and sit with that for a second. And then perhaps you sit with, again, he's a forgotten philosopher a little bit, unless you're a philosopher person, which I'm not. But it's, worth dipping your toe in sometimes, or listening to his Desert Island Disc. Isaiah Berlin, amazing thinker of the last 20th century, of the 20th century, the last century, said that, no two people's, this is nutshell stuff. I mean, the work is quite dense, but no two people's utopias can ever look the same.
No.
Your vision of a perfect society, of a perfect life, would never perfectly coincide with mine. And so consequently, all utopian philosophies, the ideas of perfect societies, require an important degree of coercion. Unless we're able to sit and have a conversation about the bits of society, the best bits we can share with one another, and dispose of the arrogance that one philosophy, one idea, one political party has all of the solutions. And we're able to have an exchange of ideas. And it's the same in art. That idea, where we get that with the idea that it's not just about open-mindedness. It's about accepting the fact that I might learn something from this. I'm moved by it. Enabling us to have a conversation.
Yes.
To be open about it, rather than tribal.
Absolutely. I think, I think it's in a native Indian where they say you have to hold the stick. And when you hold the stick, it's you talking.
Right.
And I think that, like, even talking to you now, I'm expressing what I'm going through. I have no preconceived idea of what we're going to talk about. I have no preconceived idea of what the next question is. I don't even know what I'm saying now. I'm just making it up. But what I mean by that is most listening is the articulation of the next thing they're going to say. Most listening.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Go on.
I'm sure even in the barrister or in the law world, you probably do have to think 1 or 2 steps beyond you when you're not speaking. I'm sure that is a skill set. But I think that most misunderstanding is that you're not actually present to what's being said.
No, you come projecting your
projecting
argument
before you've even heard.
Of course.
Does this make sense?
Makes total sense. And it's basically an articulation of what you're talking about, the echo chamber. About the idea that we come with a preconceived dogma of ideas. We're not listening. What we're doing is shouting down somebody else's rather than sitting, listening, hearing. It's a word we need to come back to, and engaging. And to be confident enough in our ideas and in ourselves and our love for our own humanity to know that we can give the gift of ourselves of actually being wrong and being persuaded.
Amazing.
Which is an enormous thing.
When you do like the TV show, The Judge Rinder, when you're listening to someone, are you listening from the perspective of it being a show and it's entertainment and you have to keep it at that level? Or do you really listen to what they're saying and really try to give them the feedback that's honest to you? How does it work? Because it is that's staged version.
That's a super question. It's a really good question. I was about to say there's different sorts of listening and hearing.
Yeah.
When you're a barrister, you come with a different intention. You come with a specific...
You want that outcome.
Right. You come with a specific strategy. Right? You know, if you're cross-examining somebody, you're putting your client's case, your job is to put that case effectively. So sure, you're listening to the answers, but effectively you have a mission in that conversation to ring fence them, to make an admission, etc. Being inverted commas an arbitrator or a judge in the case of Judge Rinder is totally different. And I want to be emphasised. Yes, we have the odd funny case.
Yes.
And of course, there's an element of pantomime and theatre about them, but the vast majority of them are not.
You said they were real earlier.
They're all
real
real.
Cases.
Every case is real, deadly real. And we're, regulated by Ofcom. And often cases will last an hour and a half, and you only see 20, 30 minutes of the show on telly. But within that, there's never a moment when I'm dealing with a serious case. It might be about back payment or perhaps child custody payments, or let's say a family relationship has broken down over debt, or let's say it's a landlord and tenant case, whatever. There is never, and I emphasise this, the show would have died, I would have been eviscerated as well. A moment where I shut the door behind me, we shoot it as live, we don't stop and reshoot.
Yeah.
Where I think, would this be interesting for telly? Never, never, not once.
So it's not from that perspective.
It'd be inauthentic and people can tell.
Yeah, you can tell.
But also, something that's just really interesting riff on the theme, if you like, of what you're talking about. Very often what's happened in the cases that I see where you've had kind of family toxic breakdown, they come to sue over money, in many instances, but not all. It's the first time they've seen that other person. And my job, again, not all the time, but in many cases, is to facilitate a space where they are conscripted, forced in some instances, to hear, to listen, to hear one another. And what that means is that, and why sometimes, again, not always, it depends with the intention, of course, you come to court and a variety of other factors. But sometimes, and not in an inconsiderable amount of cases, what happens is that somebody who comes with a dispute about money finally learns and hears what that money meant to the other person. And so very often you see, and it's not about privilege, I'll be clear about Clark, because families across the board of every background, creed and the rest of it break down over these sorts of things. And it's usually not about the thing that the family ended up breaking down about. It's about a rich and painful thread that's woven into a tapestry of other things. Then eventually, if you gift someone the space of going, okay, here's your anger. First of all, you're going to have to be really uncomfortable as you listen to that person's anger. Secondly, you're forced, because of me, to hear that person and not say anything. So you've heard it, and you're going to be asked to respond. Not with your case. The first question you always ask, very often they cut this out, is you've just heard John say that when you didn't pay that money back, he felt you were like a brother to him as a friend. And for him, it was as painful as when his mother died.
Wow.
And that's what they'll say sometimes. How does it make you feel to know that despite having gone on holiday and done all these other things, you could have paid that money back, and how you made this person who was your friend feel? And not all the time, but very often, it changes the entire complexion of that room. You can feel it, I think. Anyway, and it's happened. It's proven
That's
happened.
almost like a therapy session.
A good one.
I'm not. Yeah. But
no, I don't do therapy. Yeah,
no, I'm
but
not saying that. But like to hear someone, you said for the first time they've seen each other.
Yeah.
And you're forcing them into
With
a
rules.
situation where you have to speak, you have to listen,
Right.
with respect.
Right. Well,
Because you can listen and switch off.
Which is often the way, but
Yeah.
then often, I mean, this is a different conversation. Just as you can look, I sometimes if I'm not in the mood, if I'm going, as I write for the Stand, I might be going to a piece of opera. If I'm not in the mood and I'm halfway through, I'll leave because I feel like I'm doing an ugly disservice to the right, or I'm just not in it.
Yeah.
I've had this going to galleries, just not in the right headspace.
Yeah. It's good to acknowledge that and to change that.
100%, and I'll leave. I think... Yeah, it can make a few.
You probably changed some people's relationships with
we've
each other.
definitely been part of that process for a few, but for some with the right intention, it has improved their relationships. I've had less. But it's what I was just thinking about is in the context of relationships. I've divorced, and one of the things that I learned from that experience, painful experience, we're together for a long time, is precisely this: is that part of the way that you nurture a long-term relationship is exactly what you just sort of inferred, which is that oftentimes people want to have the conversation where they're not in an emotional or sometimes just biological place to hear. So you're really angry about, so you want to have this conversation now because it's important to you, because you're angry about something, and because you want resolution or you want contrition or something. That's what you want. And it needs to come out, and it can't stay in, because ultimately that will do violence to you in the long term if you start mulling it over. At the same time as picking your moment or telling the other person that they need to hear you, or when the other person's speaking to you, making clear that, look, just so you know, these 4 things happened today, which means...
It's context.
I can't hear you.
Yeah, it's context.
Because I'm like, I want to hear what you're saying. I know you're annoyed, but I'm annoyed about loads of other shit. So this is just being received by me as... complaint as opposed to a pain that you're in that I've caused you. So kind of
that's quite a big thing to acknowledge. The other parameters.
I guess I'm shit at it. But
you just explained like that's. I
no,
thought
but
that
sometimes
was a very
no, but you can explain it. But then sometimes it's like I'm terrible at my own accounts, but I did international sort of fraud, and I could immediately look at somebody else's accounts at a big company and go, yeah, that's where the fraud is. Or like interior designers often live in Baroque squalor.
Right.
You go into the houses, it's full of crap because...
Isn't that I find that fascinating where the skill, the skill set that I think I'm not very good at?
Yeah.
I don't think I'm very good with colour.
Shut the front door.
I'm not even joking.
That's the most ridiculous thing I've heard in 2020, and I've been advising on the COVID regulations. So
that's funny.
Trust me.
A dear friend, Maurice Lipsitch, he's like one of the top psychiatrists in the country, and he's one of the most fascinating people I've ever met.
Yeah.
And I once said, "Oh, can we do a recording together? I'd love to do a recording." It was before like podcasts. Yeah. This was years ago. He said, "Oh, I haven't got anything to say." I said, "You're one of the most interesting people I've ever met. Like, what are you talking about?" It's like, "No, I haven't got anything to say." And I remember I was at a gym in Home House, and Harry Enfield was in there, and we used to see each other when we were in the gym. And I said to him, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Oh, I'm doing a live performance for BBC or something." And I was like, "Oh, can I come?" He said, "Oh, you know what? It's sold out. I'm really sorry." He said, "Oh, don't worry. I'm not very funny." I said, "Harry Enfield, what are you talking about?" And I find it fascinating that the thing that people are almost bordering, and I'm not saying this to me, but almost bordering on genius in a certain level, that's the very thing that they struggle with. It's like, I find that fascinating.
It is true. I think. I mean, I think
sure
there's
you've
something
met
British
someone.
about it as well.
Right.
But I mean, those are a range of different humans with different experience and different nuanced reasons why a psychiatrist might think they've got nothing to say. So, you know, if you're a scientist and psychiatrist, what does the word, you know, I immediately go to lawyer. You know,
Right,
what does
yes.
the word to say mean for him? And to say means a kind of intellectual, perhaps, or clinical contribution to the world of psychiatry. The comedians that I've met, including Harry Enfield, and performers, generally speaking, have a very complex relationship with their sense of being funny, and often they genuinely don't feel like they are.
Isn't that's fascinating?
Yeah, it's very different.
Yeah.
Fun enough about Harry Enfield, I met him at a dinner party once, and he was pretty morose. I have to tell you, he was a bit miserable. I mean, it was a bit. I wanted to. It's funny because when I see people, like my instinct is to want to go and give them a cuddle.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was like, that's all you can do. I kind of feel, I was like, well, the deep rooted insecurities we have, or the truths we tell ourselves, we have to unteach ourselves.
Absolutely. We manufacture and manifest them.
And I think sometimes, you know, friends and therapy can help, and good literature, good art is supportive and helpful and restorative, even sometimes, to be sure. But ultimately, only you can reframe your own narrative, rewrite the story that you've found yourself in, rechange the kind of character, re-pick up the pen, perhaps, and change the story on the page. But I think that's true. And so consequently, my reaction, you know, like, just as when you see, like, you know, I'll say, I mean, because he's really good looking, and I go, "Oh, you look gorgeous," and it doesn't land, and that's fine. It doesn't even persuade. 50 people could tell you that that's the case. But you don't believe the one. It's a human. It's different in different cultures, but there is I think a shared cultural experience, especially in England. I don't know,
definitely,
where the one negative thing lands and the 49 don't. Right, it's challenging. But my reaction to that is, I know I'm not going to change your conversation, so I just want to give you a cuddle and go, "Oh, shut up." And like,
and I'm not even saying that for like some kind of
no, of course,
sympathy or like response or reaction. I'm being honest, I struggle with it a lot.
No, I'm not surprised, but that's also because. But then I also think that's what saves you from being a monster.
Right. Oh, that's interesting.
You know, I think we do need to have a. It's like everything in life, marriages and health and your body's balance, and I mean, this takes us into another segue. But I know actors, for example, certain, and so let's call them. I like the real ones.
Yeah.
Well, no, actually, I can't believe I used that language. I'm going to punish myself afterwards for saying real ones, but keep it in because I shouldn't. But some actors that I've met, you know, physical performers, physical artists in some cases, that, for example, have come back from different environments where they've been disproportionately enabled to become monsters. As a really posh way, again, of saying, you know, they go to Hollywood, let's say, and all of a sudden you'd be sitting at a table and you say, "I like your jumper." Next day, 50 jumpers are there, right?
Right.
Everybody laughing at your jokes, all the rest of it. Complimenting everything you do. After a while,
it's a bubble.
But those compliments stop becoming, having value or meaning, but you become reliant on them. And it's really dangerous. And there's a sort of a very troubling connection between that, for example, and the way in which people now emotionally and psychologically engage on social media, say with Twitter and Instagram. I don't really know Instagram well, but Twitter, for example. Somebody likes your tweet, right? It's heart-shaped. It's a compliment. It's a micro compliment, which connects to a little kind of micro dose of serotonin or endorphin.
Yeah.
And that's at the end of your arm.
Mm.
And imagine 1,000 of them or 2,000 likes.
Mm.
And then that creates a codependency
Right.
on that thing. It can create something quite monstrous. We know it in people. In the case of certain actors, for example, too much of that means that you're no longer able to. What it can do is it can interfere with people's moral chemistry. Unless people are very careful about curating good people around them. That's not to bring them down ever.
No,
Ever do that.
I'm not hearing that.
No, I'm just saying it's keeping that expression, which I love now, which is it's keeping it real.
Yes.
What I mean by keeping it real is like, it's going, what? Shut up.
Yeah. But you said that before we spoke earlier about like if you do something, you know, some people will speak to you they'll give you an honest opinion. And sometimes it's not
honest, loving opinion.
And sometimes it's probably not what you want to hear, but you need to hear. Or
yes, but it's an honest, loving opinion.
Absolutely.
And it's
also constructive. It's not destructive.
Right.
Or supporting supporting an artificial.
Right, and knowing when it's too late as well. So you know, this exists in different forms of art. Okay, so with an artist, let's say I go to a show. If I know that they're in the process of making a really important thing, you hold somebody's creative capital, the currency, what they invest, it comes from them in your hands. I won't ever talk about a play and saying it's terrible to someone, ever. I really mean it's like a credo, unless it's overtly political.
Right.
Or if I go to someone's shit play, which happens from time to time, why am I going to say it shit? What value have I brought? It's someone's kid. It's someone's creative process. If they're going to take me to a play which is about the troubles in Northern Ireland, and I'm going to have to be forced into some Soviet socialist realism, I'm mixing my political experiences. You have invited me into a conversation. I'm going to tell you it's shit, and here are the reasons, because it's political.
Right.
Right. With art, which of course has a political complexion, all of it, but let's say I go to a show, unless I know that you're going to be making new work or you're in the process of new work, so you're already there, I would feel very wary about having a conversation with you about previous work that you had made and how I liked a bit, but I didn't like another bit.
Right.
Because I don't know yet that you're in a place to be making new work.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it
And
does.
I don't want to put a freaking Molotov cocktail into your creative process. Ultimately, it's not a U-shaped thing.
They can change their course.
100%. It's a powerful thing.
Can change their course.
We know that. We know in the way that there's anyway. There are various examples of that. You know, Bowie talks about it, conversations he had. Yeah, the one thing that your therapist or somebody that says one word, you go, oh. Yeah, a writer, I'm trying to think, Evelyn Waugh.
Yes.
Was interviewed in the 50s. I can't remember. Might have been on
Face
Face
to
to Face or whatever. Right.
Face to Face. I love those.
They're amazing.
Yeah.
When people had conversation, you know.
Real.
What's her name? Edith Sitwell. That's
Oh my goodness.
Her face.
Oh my goodness. There's about 60. I've got the box set. It's
They're incredible.
The Martin Luther King, he's like 23 or something years old, and it's like
incredible.
It's insane.
Back in the day when people asked questions and wanted the answers.
Yeah. He's like, so was your dad an authoritarian or was he like, and it's just like straight in there, like no hiding.
But it blew, you know, Evelyn Waugh was psychologically affected by that experience.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, was it that one or an interview? I can't remember. It's one of them. It's either, it might be. I think it might have been face to face. Whatever it was. Somebody had asked him about it, and commented negatively on a piece he'd written, and it was like,
took it.
Yeah, and I think there is. So, for example, you know, at the end of a friend's performance, your job is to delight in it until the next piece of work. When they're ready in the next piece of work and to be part of the constructive conversation, say, oh, I you know, when there's distance and time and they're already in the space of new work, I think it matters. It's part, if you like, of you never enabling bad behavior, but when you're around artists, it is a delicate thing. And it's part of being a quality friend too. There's plenty of people that you can find to sit alongside you when things are miserable. You'll not be for want of friends. That there's a sort of nonsense idea that You know, your friends are the ones that you can call them when you're really in the shit or when things are terrible. Nah,
Maybe.
that's true.
Yeah.
Of course that's true. And we know those people. If you're, you know, privileged enough and you're lucky, it's a lucky thing. Lots of people don't have it. But, you know, that's not the barometer. The real thing is like when the show goes well, or you've just finished a piece of work you're delighted, or you've sold a piece for a fuckload of money, you can't wait to phone this person and go, the best thing ever happened to me. And they go, yes.
Yeah.
You know, it's the people that delight in your success that are the ones that are,
Yeah.
they, you know, that's the barometer.
You know, that part, it's so, I find that part so fascinating where the person who makes you think in a new way, makes you see yourself in a new way, supports you where you haven't seen you needed support. Like I have like one friend, and I don't know how we've become close, but he lives in LA's, he makes suits, and a 2-minute, very much like this conversation, a very short conversation turns into like, I can't stop. Like we're just so inspired by each other. And they're very rare to find those people that really unconditionally want you to be the best version of yourself.
I don't know. I think
everyone wants that?
No, God, no. There's all sorts of, we're all, you know, we're all guilty of this. We're all jealous, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, you try as hard as you possibly can, and this is the advice I give to my godchildren. You know, don't look around what other people are doing. Life is, however short it is, it's still, you know, a marathon, not a sprint, and you'll never find happiness by comparing yourself to others. All of that stuff, some of which has become platitude for a reason, and that's the surefire way to self-destruction, actually, especially in our society where value is placed on certain things, which for artists can be lethal.
Yes.
But I don't know. I think if you tell a friend that that's what you want from them, sometimes they're not even aware of it. You know, we have to be part of better conversations of community, just like relationships.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, I've had them like, you know, you're right, miserable. This is what I need from you. And, you know, a lot of the time it's just because things are shit. It is easier to share crap that's gone on. Just as it's easier to remember the one shit thing that's happened in the day, or the bad compliment, or the thing that hasn't worked out, rather than 100 things that have.
And your brain gets locked on it.
To be sure. But sometimes after a while, there are friendships, there is emotional editing you need to do, where you realise that actually you're being dragged into, I don't use that one, but you're being sort of falsely imprisoned into other people's negativity, that actually they aren't capable of delighting in your success.
No.
They aren't people that look and go, wow, or want to be constructive, that actually your misery matters to them because it validates theirs.
Yes.
And their sense of lack of self-worth, their sense of failure. They need you to be there with them. You know, that's the misery that loves company stuff. And eventually, if you've given somebody the opportunity to change, you go, hey, you know, every time we've met, all we've talked about is this, you know, this is shit, this is failing, this is, sometimes you need to be able to have that conversation.
Yeah.
But you find out in the con, you know, last week you won a case.
Yeah.
Last week something amazing happened for you, and you know, or this happened to me, which was really good, and I felt I couldn't phone you because I felt you'd be jealous,
Right.
rather than delighted. I think anyway.
Yeah, I think I think coming out, we're in a very unusual time. 2020 has been, well, I don't even know how to explain what's happened this year, but one of the things that I'm taking from it in this moment, not last month or the month before, because I was thinking something different then.
So important.
But the thing that I am thinking now is the more you are able to eliminate distraction and noise. There is something that needs to break through, which is important. Yes, there is the distancing. Yes, there are masks. Yes, there is the numbers. Yes, you can't be in a pub after 10. There are certain things you have to know that. But with is it real? Is it not real? All of a sudden, there's a fog and it takes over. And I think if you can eliminate a lot of this distraction and go for the thing that you actually want, I think this is a really incredible time. And I know...
So it's really weird you actually described this before, it's so weird. I had an experience, which I've spoken about and I've tried to write about in my column, but I haven't actually effectively been able to articulate. And I've forgotten about it when you mentioned it before.
This is recently.
Really recently, February.
Yeah. Okay.
I got COVID in March, in fact. So I went with Comic Relief to... Well, the long and the short of it was we were supposed to be doing this event for Sport Relief, it was actually, crossing Mongolia. And it was going to be the coldest triathlon in the world. It's like some world record attempt. Wow. There was a bunch of Nick Grimshaw and a bunch of other celebrities on telly. And I'm sometimes conscripted into these events because they think I'm going to be like, are you being served John Inman on steroids?
Right.
And I'm going to yelp like a highly strung poodle. But one thing I don't do is an authentic, and nobody conscripts me into telling me what I say ever. Yes. But I can see why they've hired me to do that. So they put me in the ice bath, expecting me to yelp, as I say, like a highly strung poodle. Of course, I get into the ice bath and said I'd like a glass of wine and a cigarette. Of course, I'm dying inside. But fuck you.
Well done.
Right, no, but you don't get to determine that's not... If I'm feeling
done.
Like that...
Amazing.
But also it's because what you want and actually is... It's not how it mattered. Yeah. Right. Last minute, they're going to lock down Mongolia. And so I thought it'd be off. They moved the whole thing to Namibia. And the organisers of the event organise these great big ultra marathons. And the one that was going to be on ice was doable regardless pretty much of your physical capability because it's flat. Right. So you could cycle. As long as you're warm enough, you'd finish it. The one in Namibia was a genuinely challenging ultra marathon. And, for your listeners, I'm put on weight during COVID, but, exercise is absolutely critical part of my mental health routine. I've done marathons and stuff, and I really care about fitness, chiefly connected to my mental health, which has totally changed, if you like, the conversation about how I exist. It's very important to me. Anyway, so I was quite fit when I did it. But we're in Namibia. We fly to Namibia, and the organisers haven't mitigated this challenge in any way for a group of so-called celebrities, knowing how lethal, and only 50 people in the world has ever finished it, right? Or whatever, at 52, I think. Anyway, so we start on day one. I'm thinking, and they said, do your own race. You have to be with each other. And I'm like, I'm racing, right?
Because you're going to win.
Not going to win. That mattered to my ego, definitely. It'd be lying to say otherwise. It's more like, you don't get to determine what I can and can't do. That's a much more motivating force. Yeah. If I
identify with that.
Right, that thing of, if you're going to pick me last for games, I'm jolly going to win and have a cigarette at the end and go, you see? Told you.
I get it.
That sort of middle finger up to the world. How dare you conscript me into your version of a written narrative? I've got the pen and I write my own story. Thank you, love. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
That's sort of a powerful...
I think I feel the same.
Sometimes I can't... There's ego, there's all sorts of other things imbued in that. But basically, if I feel someone going, you're this person...
You want to prove them wrong, or you want to be your version. It's not their version.
So. I'm that person in your story that you've written. I'm that person in your movie. Not in your movie, love. Do you know what I mean? Anyhow, we do the first day. And, I've done 2 marathons, one sub 2 hours. That's quite, this is a run man that's quite serious. I get to the end of day one, and honestly, it's the hardest physical thing I've ever done. There's like a narrow bit where, imagine you're cycling, imagine a path as wide as a table, about a metre wide. It's just enough for you to stay on it looks like a perfect cycle track. It's just enough to stay on the bike, but the wheels are still spinning. So you're going 4 miles an hour, it's 32-degree heat, whatever. And you have to do that for, let's say, 7 hours. Right. Now, again, you've got all of these like butch macho boor types going, and so I'm like, But I got to the end. They wanted their great big sort of emotional cum shot. So as soon as I come in with it, I see like with the bike, I go, well, I just want you to know I'd like a glass of wine and everyone's going to sue you, you know. But then actually what transpired was the day got more and more serious was actually they hadn't adequately, I think to be fair, thought about how challenging this was. Nick Grimshaw was on television, nearly died. And, you know, Frankie Bridge and Samantha Womack was in tears. It was a nightmare. I had a fabulous day. Do you know, I'm just like, whatever. Day 2, I think the whole purpose of day 2, and this is where it connects to what you were saying before, really resonates about crowding out noise. We were supposed to do, it was a marathon across the desert, and you've got to do it by nightfall, and you know you're going up sand dunes or whatever. So I start running, and I now know effectively the general idea was we wouldn't finish this because it would be part of the conversation about failing in a task, and because part of the mission was about talking about mental health, that sort of mattered for the narrative of the film. But again, I'm sorry, love. If I could do it, I'm going to do it.
Absolutely.
Especially because I've got 2 little sticks. So it's like the 26-mile mince, which I thought at the end, that's got to be a world record, right? But the point about it was profound. And again, that's the type of word that I would normally be like, you know, unless Toni Morrison uses that in a sentence, I can't hear it, you know? But it was absolutely that. So start running, there's nothing there. And by nothingness, I mean there's one colour. It's not like a Paul Nash rock. I say Paul Nash, the rock where, you know, you see there's like a universe in a stone. It really is. It's such a limited palette.
Right.
And you can see why, for example, Stone Age people of the desert are the initiators of the Bible. There's nothing external. You have to go inwards. So I start running across this desert, and it looks like, you know, a kid's drawing of a desert. Running. And I've got no mobile phone signal, so nothing can come. I've got 9 Mahler symphonies, a bunch of Dolly Parton, a bit of John Barry, and even a bit of One Direction. that like joyous cacophony of the eclectic. Anyway, I'm running along, and I first of all, I've got no sense of direction, right? I've got lost in people's, you know, walk-in wardrobes before. It's part of the no kind of skill thing. But I've got a watch, and it's dead easy to use. So, you know, just follow the arrow, right? Because they're running. All of a sudden, I'm running across this salt plain, which does have some character at least. And I'm about, I don't know, 4 hours. It said, you know, if you listen to the voiceover, Robert is 5. It's now 20 kilometers ahead, whatever. I couldn't tell you where it was, but this is what happened. John Barry's Out of Africa came on. I could hear nothing apart from that music, my breath. There was no part of me at all that thought about when will I finish this. There was no future. There wasn't the past. I wasn't looking behind and thinking about how far I had come. I was running, breathing, and listening. And it was that moment which before had been completely alien to me. Safe to say that people that I disbelieved when they talked about having these experiences, perhaps at yoga, etc., or they listened to other people trying to describe it, I was in the moment, in time. I was in the moment. I just had my breath and me and some music. And honestly, I'm on this salt plane and I burst into tears. And I haven't cried like that in my memory for certainly 2 decades. It was the most beautiful, freeing, joyous, strange experience I've ever had. It was being in the moment. It was like, honestly, it was orgasmic. I was in the moment. It didn't last the whole thing. I want to be clear about that. It was just, I don't know how long it lasted. Maybe it was 30 seconds it could have been. Could have been. Probably a couple of minutes. Maybe, I don't know. It felt But freaking hell, it was worth it, right? But here's the problem. So I get back, having had this moment. It was amazing. It was so amazing. And then my problem, then COVID comes. I get COVID. Quite a few of us did from that trip. I was pretty delirious. It went, you know. And I was okay at the beginning and fine. I like my own company and I'm in the house and plonking on the piano, looking at a beautiful piece of art that I've got by Robbie Walters. So that helps change the conversation today. Everything's good. It's fine. Teaching a bit of Tudor history dressed as Anne of Cleves. But what I realise I'm trying to do is I want to get back there.
Right. Isn't that...
I need to get back. It's like if anybody's ever had therapy or had a beautiful conversation or a love affair, that first, the strange emotional chemistry that's just like this, wow. And in love, knowing that that's going to change and dissipate and grow into something else. But I wanted to get back. I was like, or if you ever have a moment in therapy you might have and I say it can be in a conversation with a friend where you're, and it's so like a breakthrough or something, an epiphany, whatever it is. It was that. And then about July, I decided I wanted to go walking in the Lake District because what I was trying to do my depression came back and I wanted to get back. I was desperately trying to get back to that, being in the moment. And I realized it was impossible because it was that one moment in time and I needed the right circumstances. But what you said before helped me think about that because the reason I was able to get to that place,
cutting out the noise.
There was no noise.
Yeah.
Apart from the noise that I had chosen to be there. It was silent. And it enabled this whole universe of stuff, which was a total gift. Except that when you've been in that extreme high, you then I've then had to work through going, I want to go, I want that again. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
I want that. Well, why didn't that happen? Anyway, it was amazing.
Well, thank you.
No, thank you.
Is there anything before we leave? Is there anything you want to say? Is there anything
I
you want
love
to
your
share?
art. I want to share. I want to share that, sadly, people can't come round to my house. You're not invited. I don't cook. Don't invite me to your dinner party.
Do you make cocktails?
Yeah, I make cocktails. You come to that.
Yes.
Now I'm into that. I do cocktails and then take away. I know people enjoy cooking and they're doing it and there's love in it and stuff. It's just like, I don't want to eat your food because that's why restaurants are there. And because this is part of that conversation about being kind about it. Yeah. There's nothing more dispiriting than arriving at someone's house and go, we've made fish. They're like, oh God.
Note to self.
No, I don't want to go. I like to be, if I get invited to someone's house, I want to be invited into their kitchen.
Yes.
I don't want to be on the posh table because then you don't get anything. I don't want to be on the posh table. Anyway, the reason I say that is because you're never going to be invited to my house. But if you are lucky enough, you will see at the centerpiece of a collection of, some seriousness, inverted comma serious, is a piece that Robert did now, probably coming up for 10 years ago, I think. Wow. Maybe more. Yeah, more than 10 years, I'd say.
Yeah.
And it is more than 10 years.
Yes. Goodness.
And I look at it every day, and it changes all the time. And what's so fascinating is because of where it is now, and there's a gallery upstairs, a gallery landing, is it completely changes as to where and how you look at it, which is part of the reason I love your work, because of its texture and how it inevitably forces us to change perspective. It looks different every day.
Amazing.
Underneath it, or where the light hits on it, or one day it can be rough. You can literally just see the roughness. You can see the edges. Some days it can be a sunrise. If you look at it dead on, I've got a mirror on the other. I mean, genuinely, and so
I love that.
It just makes you think about the texture of it in a totally different way. And people's reactions to it are fascinating as well. It's really, especially in terms of age,
right,
and how they respond. It's anyway, it's my favorite piece of art. And I'm sorry you're not invited.
Fantastic.
But one day, when you have your retrospective, there'll be a little thing saying collection of, but it will have no explanation that has, this was the moment in Robbie Waters' life when he was experimenting with the magical symbiosis between. It won't have any of that. It'll have, do you like it or not? You're allowed not to. Although don't come to my house if you do.
What you chat about? What you chat about? What you chat about? Thank you for listening. This podcast was produced by Viral Tribe. For more information about our work, please visit tribe.fm with 2 eyes. Sign up and join the podcast revolution!